Hello, and welcome to Baha'i Blogcast, with me, your host, Rainn Wilson. This is where I interview members of the Baha'i Faith and other friends from all over the world about their hearts and minds and souls, their spiritual journeys, what they're interested in, and what makes them tick. Enjoy. Okay, welcome back to Baha'i Blogcast with me, your host, Rainn Wilson. I have a really exciting guest today, and I've been wanting to get him on this brand new show of mine for some time. He's a dear friend, an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a Baha'i visionary, all-around great guy, and an immigrant, Payam Zamani. So let's welcome Pam Zamani to the show. Woo, woo. Payam Zamani. I think that's a bad sign, Payam. We're starting the blog, and then a bird just flew into that window. Did you see that?
I heard it. I didn't see it.
You heard that little thunk? He's fine. He flew in at about 1.5 miles per hour. So then he went and he's sitting on a branch. But
I think your dog is happy down there. So,
and we have pigs. You see our pigs down there?
I did.
Yeah. So welcome to the show, Payam. Thanks for coming on. And I'm intrigued by so many different aspects of your story. There's so many facets to you as just a dynamic human being who you really are one of those rare Baha'is that are completely inspired by your faith, and it drives almost everything that you do. And I admire that so much and really look up to so much that you've done. But your background is harrowing. I mean, you went through so much as an immigrant refugee from Iran. Can you let the listeners know a little bit about what that experience was like?
Well, I'm really glad to be on this podcast. And Rainn, you're really kind for everything that you said about me. And maybe you can keep going, and I would love to just listen more to more of that.
Payam, he is an outrageously handsome human being as well.
I'm glad this is a podcast, so you don't see the truth. I came to the U.S. in '88 after having escaped Iran as a 16-year-old in '87. So I think it'll be 29 years this July 7th that I left Iran in the middle of the night and got through the border, made it to Pakistan, and something like 10 days later made it to Lahore, where I spent 1 year of my life. Interesting 1 year.
For a 17-year-old Iranian boy in Lahore, Pakistan?
Exactly. Well, I was 16 when I got there. I was 17 when I left. You know, it's interesting. It was a tough place to live, but it was a fun time. It was not, I don't look back at it and think that it was, it was a sad time. Not at all. Mm-hmm. Imagine you're living in a town with 2,000 other Baha'i youth. That's what it was like. And
there were that many in Lahore at that time?
Yeah. It was, we had a great time being in Lahore, and we didn't go to school for a year, so it wasn't that bad.
Fantastic. So what were the circumstances that prompted you and your family to leave Iran, and what kind of persecution did you experience?
So I need to go back a few years to when I was 11. So actually, even going back prior to that, my parents loved the idea of pioneering. So we lived in many places where there were very few or no Baha'is in Iran. And even in the middle of 70s, we went to India for a short period of time with the idea of living there and staying there. We went back to Iran when we could not get permanent residency from the Indian government. When I was 11 years old, we moved to a town called Hashgerd, which is about 75 kilometers west of Tehran. And we had lived there before in the 70s, before we had gone to India, and we owned a house, so we went back there after the revolution. Life was very tough in that town before the revolution. Like, imagine that every night they would break our windows. They would throw rocks at our home.
Wow.
They would beat my brother and sister when they would go to school. But after the revolution, life even became much more difficult.
More difficult than that.
More difficult. And you wonder, why would you go back to that town? Mm-hmm. Well, then you got to talk to my parents about, of course, their view that you don't go places where it's easy to live. You don't run away from difficulties and challenges because you're Baha'i. You embrace
them.
You embrace them, exactly.
Part of the sacrifice of faith.
Exactly. So in that town, I'm going to make the long story short. Basically, when I was 11, I was in my 6th grade, first year of middle school. And every school had this individual who was responsible to make sure everybody was embracing Islam. After the revolution, every school had that kind of a person. And
what's that job title? Islam police?
Something like that. In Farsi, they call it Irshad. I don't know what it means. I think it means that you ensure that people are following the right path to God.
It's like a guidance counselor, only it's for religion.
Yes. Now, this guy was not a mullah, so he didn't have a turban on and so on. But he would be responsible for the mass prayer on campus every day. Mm-hmm. And he would also give a sermon every day. Mm-hmm. And they would ask me and this other Baha'i boy to join them. And we would say, well, we are Baha'is, we have our own prayers, and, we wouldn't join them. Now, having said that, I had won the award for memorizing the most verses from Quran during this competition they had. Oh. So they had kind of a love-hate relationship with me. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, so one day during the sermon that they had, we heard that he told the kids, we're going to get rid of these Baha'i boys today. We're like, oh, great. Life has been not so good. We're going to be even less popular come today. So when the school ended, we saw about 100 kids with rocks and sticks waiting outside for us. As teachers were leaving, driving away, we're kind of like asking them, can you please get us out of here? And nobody would want to have anything to do with us for obvious reasons. Everybody left. It was us and this mob. And finally, this friend of mine and I, we said, okay, well, it's either now or an hour from now or whenever. If we don't go, they'll come to us. So we walked towards them and we had to go through them to get to our home, which was about a mile away, walking distance. For about a mile, we got beaten up pretty badly with rocks and sticks. Worse than that, though, they spit on us. And by the time we got home, I was drenched. I was wet, head to toe from spit. And it was tough. It was tough. We were bloody. We had beaten up really badly. Frankly, I did not think we were going to survive it. I don't know how we survived it. I remember during this, March of Death, one of them picked a big rock to throw at my head. For whatever reason, it did not hit me. Hit another guy who fell. I don't know what happened to him. But, it was tough. We finally made it home. And I was upset. I was upset at what these kids had done.
How old were you again?
11.
Wow, my son's age.
Yeah, my daughter's also 11. So, it's just hard for, I think, an 11-year-old to truly understand why people would treat you this way just because you believe in a different religion. So that was the last day I went to that school. They expelled us from school and they were very clear that we wanted to kill them. We couldn't, so they should not come back to this school. And that night, I did not sleep in our house. My parents were worried that they would come for us. So I was moved to Tehran, and my parents had me go to Tehran. And my sister lived in Tehran. She was married, and I lived with her for the next 2 years until my parents sold their house, moved to Shiraz, and I moved to Shiraz and joined them. We moved to Shiraz. A month after, they had murdered 10 Baha'i girls. Mm. And we ended up not knowing, bought a house in a neighborhood that they had just burned down all Baha'i homes. Mm. So we did not choose our real estate acquisition very carefully. I guess my parents had not. We ended up living in an area of town that was not very friendly to Baha'is. But all in all, I did not have a very difficult time going to school in Shiraz.
This was all after the revolution?
Yes. In 1981 is when I was expelled from school, and in 1983 we moved to Shiraz.
So it sounds like there was a lot of prejudice against Baha'is before the revolution, but after the revolution it was sanctioned and encouraged, and a kind of more of a mob mentality was fostered. Would you say that that's true against the Baha'is? And I wonder too if a lot of the Muslim people in Iran were kind of scared, being under this, this really violent theocracy.
I think you're right. Here's the interesting thing. When a lot of Persian immigrants that we meet outside of Iran, they've come from Tehran. And most of them, they've come from northern Tehran. Life there is fundamentally different than where overwhelming majority of Iranians live. Mm-hmm. That's where we lived, where overwhelming majority of Iranians live. We did not.
So you're saying that most refugees to the United States after the revolution that are Iranian came from a certain area of Tehran. It would be like people from suburban Los Angeles all leaving, but that's not what life is like in the majority of the United States.
That's exactly it. Mm-hmm. Overwhelming majority of Iranians live southern part of Tehran, mm-hmm. Where they're not necessarily well-to-do, or they live outside of Iran. So imagine 70-some-odd% or 80%. And so once you leave that part of Iran, think of it as a green zone in Baghdad, mm-hmm. you leave, life is very different, and people treat minorities a lot worse. Than they do in Tehran. I mean, Tehran people are more educated. They are...
So in rural Iran, it's even worse treatment for Baha'is, and even in smaller, medium and smaller sized towns.
Absolutely. Mm. Now, and frankly, my parents wanted us to live in places that we would be able to teach the faith. I mean, a lot of these places that we lived, there were no other Baha'is.
So how would you teach the faith in a place where they were so prejudiced against Baha'is?
Frankly, through your action. You wouldn't hold a fireside. Mm-hmm. You couldn't really do that. Simply through your action and through service in the community that you would do that.
Great. So you went through, fast forward, you went to Lahore, mm-hmm. and then where did you come in the United States, and what was that culture shock like for you?
There was a big culture shock. I had a cousin here in the U.S., in California. So I was excited. I was going to California.
Now, were you a wealthy refugee family, or did you have a lot of stuff, or not so much?
No. My brother and I, we came to the U.S. at the same time. And together we had $75 in our pocket.
And how old were you again?
I was 17 at the time, and my brother was 23.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And the money we had was sent to us by our 21-year-old cousin from the U.S., who was waiting for us at San Francisco airport.
Okay.
And he picked us up June 20th, 1988. And we went to Modesto. That's where he lived, Modesto, California. Not exactly what I had in mind when I thought about California or the United States.
Tell the listeners who don't know about Modesto a little bit about it. It's farming community, mostly Hispanic, right?
Exactly. Farming community, you're right, absolutely Hispanic. I would say a little bit of a rough town. Mm-hmm. It is... it's a good town. People are beautiful, loving, and all in all, I had a great experience living there. But it's just not the kind of city I had in mind when I thought about the U.S. I thought New York. I thought San Francisco, Los Angeles.
No one thinks Modesto.
No one thinks Modesto. But Modesto had some other interesting things, like the graffiti night, from the movie that was still going on every.
You mean American Graffiti?
American Graffiti.
Oh, like drag racing and kind of, what do they call that? And then just going up and down the street. Cruising.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah. Cruising. So every Friday night, there was cruising on McHenry Avenue.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw it, I couldn't believe it. In this town, bumper-to-bumper traffic starting at 11 p.m. on a Friday night would go on to like 1 or 2 a.m. And people had one purpose in mind, guys, collect as many phone numbers as you can.
Sure.
And so, you know, it was fun. I did not collect many phone numbers. I did not speak English. So that did not work.
That is a culture shock from Lahore to Modesto and cruising night. That's fantastic. So you
in my red Pinto.
In your red Pinto?
In my red Pinto.
Okay, good for you. And what kind of jobs did you have?
My first job, I had many jobs, but and many times I had multiple jobs at the same time. I worked at a pizza place.
Yeah.
That was my first job. My day job at night, I worked at a cannery, S&W, and I did silk screen printing. I worked at an AM/PM. I did all kinds of stuff.
That's fantastic. You started at the bottom. And did you experience... So there's a lot of talk about immigration now in the current political climate. What was that experience like being an immigrant in the United States? Did you experience a lot of prejudice? I mean, there are obviously a lot of Hispanic, Latin, Mexican, Central American immigrants in Modesto. Did you get mistaken for being Latin American at all? Or what was that like?
No, I was never mistaken. Actually, that's a good question. I don't know why. Maybe my accent. Mm-hmm. But it was, it's interesting. Truth to be told, I know that there were times I experienced prejudice, but I never saw it. Mm. And you got to keep in mind, I experienced a lot more prejudice in Iran than I did in Modesto.
So it was a cakewalk.
It was a cakewalk.
If people made fun of your accent or spurned you or something, you're like, hey, at least they're not spitting on me and throwing rocks at me.
That's it. And if they did, there was a police to go to.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, life was good. I did not really have any complaint. I enjoyed living in Modesto.
So how did you're an amazing entrepreneur. How does a kid who's making pizzas and doing silk screening, working at AM/PM Mini Mart in Modesto, go from that to owning very large, successful companies and startups in the Bay Area? Just talk me through that. What's the 4-minute version of that story?
So I think a lot of it has to do with what, as a Baha'i, I went through in Iran, that all Baha'is who work for the government and many other major companies, they lost their jobs post-revolution because of their religion. So I remember my father, encouraging us to be entrepreneurs as we were growing up. And my parents, they were both nurses at some point, and my dad had different kinds of administrative jobs at hospitals. And they thought it would be great if we would have our own businesses. So we wouldn't be working for the government and as a result being, at their mercy. So I think that was pretty much a foregone conclusion. The question was, for me, am I going to potentially go into medicine, as a lot of Persian kids did go down that path, or would I own my own business? And ultimately, I came to the conclusion that I want to own my own business, and I did not want to go into medicine. Frankly, I was worried that I would want to make money. And I thought that being a doctor was not... I did not want to be a doctor who thought about making money as kind of like one of the primary reasons that I had chosen that profession. Mm-hmm. So I chose not to go into that field. In 1994, I graduated from UC Davis, and my brother graduated from Chico State. I went to a better school. So, but he had a good idea, which the idea was, let's start a business on the internet about cars, helping people buy a car, starting their research online, and hopefully get connected to a car dealer online. That was in 1994 when, Yahoo and a couple other companies had started, but there was really nobody else.
That's when you got those discs in the mail from AOL saying, pay $20 a month for your email account.
That's right.
Yeah.
That we would hang them from trees so birds would not eat our cherries. So that was the beginning. And frankly, we did that as enthusiasts more than anything else, not knowing that we had thought about a big idea. We had no idea, frankly. I mean, we wanted to build that. We thought maybe we can pay the bills building that business, but we never thought that it would become a really huge business. And we happened to be at the right place at the right time.
What was the name of the domain name?
The company was called autoweb.com, which frankly, if I could go back in time, I would just buy domains. Why build a company?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was funny. We could have bought cars.com, autos.com. We chose autoweb.com, which probably was a less valuable domain name. They're all available. But we built that, you know, it was tough. I mean, we just learned as we went. And I would listen to Anthony Robbins, Wayne Dyer, and so on.
Self-help, motivational speakers.
Zig Ziglar. And I would just, you know, pump myself up and, you know, get out there and go to a car dealer and try to sell them with my broken English. And it was fun. We had a great time building that business. And it doesn't matter. Even if you're more successful in life later on, I think the experiences you have building a business for the first time, regardless of how well you do, it's just something you cannot repeat. And that was a lot of fun.
I always, you know, in my book, it's so much about those hard years and the years of struggle. So when you're rewarded after all those hard years of work, it's so much sweeter than if you kind of stumble into great success. Right away, and that's where the richness of your life is in the struggle.
You know, one of my best friends, he owns a winery, and I'm not going to tell the brand because it's a very well-known brand, and he wouldn't want me to probably tell this story. But we were so poor. As we were trying to sell our product during the AutoWeb days, we would stay at Motel 6 when you're on the road. We would share a bed. And, but absolutely, I mean, those are, you know, you don't have the money, you do whatever you have to do, you sleep on the floor, one person takes the bed or whatever. But the idea is that you make it through those rough days. And, you know, as a result, I think you're better off. Not just because of the money you end up making, hopefully, if you're successful, but I think the character you build and the hardship you get used to.
And how was your faith through this time?
By that, you mean if I was...
Yeah, were you were a steadfast Baha'i during all of this? Did you pray a lot and hold Baha'u'llah close to you and keep your Baha'i principles in front of you during this time? Did you have some rocky times where you doubted your faith?
I did not have rocky times. I know a lot of youth do. I never did. So I never doubted my faith. There were times that I was probably less involved, you know, than other times. But no, I was always, you know, I tried tried my best to be a good Baha'i, and I'm sure I failed at it all the time. But I did try. Well,
because fast forwarding, when I first met you, was on a trip to Haiti. Remember, we were both working for Mona Foundation. You were on the board of Mona Foundation, and I was the spokesperson and just getting going there. And that was such a fun trip, getting to see those schools and visit the schools the Mona Foundation supported, and visiting the Baha'is in Haiti. But you were, at the time, you had this company, Reply.com, which you sold briefly, then bought back now. And the interesting thing to me is that you've reformatted Reply.com into a very different company that is kind of Baha'i inspired. So tell the listeners about that.
I think I had an epiphany a few years ago. I was at the Association for Baha'i Studies conference a few years ago in Irvine, California, and you spoke there. And also Layli Miller spoke there. And it wasn't your speech, unfortunately, but it was Layli's.
I wasn't going to say anything.
It was Layli's that
no comment.
Inspired me. And I remember I turned to my wife, Guya, and I said that I'm jealous. And she said, what about? I said that Layli's day job is service. And I wish I could say that I go to work every day and what I do is service. And we know that in the Baha'i Faith, we say that work offered in the spirit of service is worship. But really, let's think about it. You know, if I'm a physician, I'm trying to charge my insurance as much as I can. Is that really worship? If I'm a hedge fund manager in New York, is that really worship? I mean, I don't know, maybe, but I've got my doubts. And same thing with my job. If I'm enabling Ford Motor Company to do online advertising more efficiently, maybe sending emails to your inbox a little bit easier, is that worship. So the opportunity that I've had in the last year and a half with my company that since acquiring it from the investors, I changed the name to One Planet Ops. I've had the opportunity to try to go one step at a time and see how we can bring about, instill some of the Baha'i principles into a for-profit organization. We are far from where I want to be, but we are trying very hard to instill those principles.
So you have a lot of different subdivisions of One Planet Ops, your Baha'i-inspired umbrella company. One of them is still doing online marketing and advertising, especially for car sales. What other lines of work does One Planet Ops do?
Our primary source of revenue is a marketplace that makes it easier for businesses in the automotive industry, real estate, and home improvement to do marketing online. So large or small, like every car maker in the US buys traffic from us. We own a directory called Merchant Circle, and we own a bunch of other smaller websites. We also do incubation of new ideas. We are about to launch an online home improvement service, social mobile solution called contractors.com that will change the way that people connect to contractors, hopefully. We do angel investing.
That could only be a positive thing.
I know, we really have to screw up to make it negative. And then we do angel investing. But everything that we do has to somehow benefit the world around us.
Will you invest in this Baha'i Blogcast, please? I need $100,000 to finish this podcast.
Is it for profit? If it's
it.
not, then it's not an investment. I'll shake your hand, but it's not an investment, then it's a contribution, which we do. So let's have that conversation.
How about you buy me a latte?
There you go.
So what does that mean? You've got One Planet Ops, this company that does all of these different things, and it's Baha'i. What do you say? It's Baha'i inspired. It's driven by Baha'i principles. What does that look like? I know that you have 100 employees, right?
Yes.
And a lot of Baha'is work for you. True?
That's right. Yes.
But what specifically does that work look like? Is it Baha'i holidays? Is it hukukullah for the company? Do you pray at staff meetings? I mean, what does it look like?
All good questions, and I'm trying to answer a lot of those every day and try to figure it out. But the company does contribute directly to the faith. But beyond that, we take Nowruz as one Baha'i holiday that as a company we take off. So I love the fact that my employees don't work that day and they tell their families they're not working because of Baha'i holiday. We may increase the number of Baha'i holidays as a company will take off. We have not made that decision yet. We we have a company meeting, all offices all over the world. They get together via video conference or in person. And one of the things that we do is that we share what we call a reflection. And that could be from the Baha'i writings if it's shared by one of the Baha'i employees. And it could be about any topic. And even, others may share other topics. But it's supposed to be something that is a bit spiritual, something that touches.
Do you do it by email, or do you all meet and have the reflection?
We meet. It is in person, and those who are not there.
So it's almost some meditation.
It could be not. Recently somebody's reflection was about Prince. And that's absolutely fine. We're not going to tell them not to do it about that. But it could be, the tablet by Abdul Baha to live the life. And that is absolutely fine too. So we give the freedom to people, but to focus on something that goes beyond the everyday business.
And you're very vocal about the fact that your company is for-profit. And how do you balance for-profit company with being a Baha'i company? I know that you're very influenced by the writings of Larry Miller, who's Layli Miller Murrow's dad, about kind of Baha'i spiritual capitalism. What have you learned from him?
Yeah, he has a wonderful book, Spiritual Enterprise. Those who have visited me in my office, you know that I have many copies of that book, and you get that as a gift from me. And it's a book that allows you to put Baha'i teachings into practice. And I think as Baha'is, a lot of us have these questions that we have these beautiful teachings, but how can I actually put it to work in my everyday job? And I think this book does a very good job of helping you, guiding you doing so.
What are some of the principles of it?
Well, about profit sharing is a big one. One of the things that I did after reading Larry Miller's book was that I decided to go against what the Silicon Valley does, which is shares ownership in a company in the form of stock options. I decided to share profits, which is what Abou talks about, and this book certainly talks about. And it turned out to be the best thing we could have done. People want stock options so they can make some extra money. The problem is that overwhelming majority of the companies in Silicon Valley never have that exit, whether a sale or an IPO. So those stock options rarely become worth anything. So it's almost like a hope that never materializes. But profits, if as a company, all of you are focusing on the fundamentals of the business, that can materialize every single month. So not the employees.
So in terms of ownership, you're the 100% owner, and then you opt to share your profits with your employees under a Baha'i standard.
That's right. So every employee of One Planet every month gets a profit check. Of course, if you're profitable. If we're not, they won't.
Do they get a different percentage of that profit depending on their, the guy sweeping the floors does he get as much of a share of the profit as the guy who's head of marketing?
Their shares are calculated based on their salary. Mm-hmm. So if you have a higher salary, you get a higher share of the profits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My next question is, can I have a job?
You absolutely can have a job, whatever you qualify for.
Do you need someone to sweep the floors?
Well, we need a spokesperson, and I think you know a few things about that.
That I can do.
Actually, I was thinking about the good contractor, bad contractor. I thought for contractors.com, you could be the bad contractor.
That's a role I was born to play. I've had some experience with some bad contractors too. And one of your side enterprises I love and is near and dear to my heart, and that is BahaiTeachings.org. It's org, right? Not
That's right.
Org. So you founded founded and funded and created the most popular and really exciting and up-to-date web presence for people to learn about the Baha'i Faith.
I don't know if it's the most popular or not because I don't know what's the traffic and information, the data from many other sites.
Well, how many visitors do you guys get a month?
About 60,000 visitors a month, about 300,000 fans in social media. But there are many other great ones, including Baha'i Blog, of course, which is one that we learn a lot from. So the reason that I started, and sorry, I'm not sure if that's what you asked, but I'm going to answer anyways.
Just dive in.
So the reason that I wanted to start with my wife, Guya, BahaiTeachings.org, was because I wanted us to teach the faith. And the problem was that I didn't know how best I can use my skills to work. And until, I guess, one day it occurred to me that, look, we're doing all these different things with my businesses to try to bring traffic, consumer traffic, to our websites. And we did a lot of search engine optimization as part of the work that we did in search engine marketing. And I thought that what if we could have so much content about the Baha'i Faith, about the kinds of topics that seekers are likely to search for when they're seeking. Mm-hmm. So they would be able to come across Baha'i content even when they have not heard of the Baha'i Faith. Because majority of people have not heard of it, and they're not going to include the term Baha'i in their search. So I just wanted that to be the case. And I figured, I just made up this number in my mind, that there's probably about 10,000 articles that if you publish, we're going to be able to accomplish that. And I just did the math on how many years will it take, how we have to ramp it up. And so we started building. And the idea was to build a shell of a website and then invite all kinds of people who may not be a scholar in the Baha'i Faith, but may know one subject really well.
Right.
Get them to write one article or maybe 5 articles. And there are some scholars who will write a lot more. But I wanted that 19-year-old to write about whatever he or she was crazy about and had studied that in the faith and knew the teachings about that one subject. So now...
What's an example of that?
Let's say that you are a PhD student and you are doing stem cell research. How do you reconcile that with spiritual teachings? Mm-hmm. And I would love to read that. I don't think we have an article on that subject yet, but I would love to read it.
Right.
And that, kind of like TED does a very good job with it.
Is there an example of one that has been published that's an interesting kind of niche area of study that's been explored from a Baha'i perspective?
I mean, there are many of them. One that I shared with you earlier that's not necessarily down that path, but miscarriage, that a Baha'i...
Miscarriage.
Miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Baha'i writing an article about miscarriage because she went through that and then studied, the Baha'i teachings about that experience and wrote an article about that, which has touched so many people. But that is really what you're talking about. That one person can do a great job writing one article. I may or may not be able to give a 1-hour keynote about anything, but I may be able to write, 500 words about the subject I'm really crazy about. And that's really what it's
And you
about.
guys do 2 articles a day on Baha'i teachings.
2 articles a day. We publish over 2,200 articles so far. About 160 writers from all over the world have participated so far in writing for us. Some of my most favorite articles are about that were published a few years ago about international convention in Haifa, the only international democratic election in the world, and the process and how that happens, and people who vote for these individuals, voting for people who are not nominated, nobody's campaigning.
Right.
How do you vote? And how do you choose who to vote for? And those are some of the most fascinating articles that I think anyone has ever published on this website.
That's fantastic. And you've had some success at teaching the faith from Baha'i teachings.
Never enough, but we've had, of course, we have tens of thousands of visitors to the website, and we're blessed that the traffic is growing. And we have had hundreds of seekers who've reached out to us to be connected to the local communities where they reside. So I could not be more grateful for the community we built of writers, of visitors, of seekers. It's been wonderful. It's been a great experience.
And if people want to get involved with Baha'iTeachings.org or want to write or help out in some way, where can they contact?
On Baha'iTeachings.org, just send us an email, and I would love to connect with you, and or just Payam at Baha'iTeachings.org. I would love to get you as join us as a writer, and we need more help.
That's great. And you have 2 girls, Sophie and Ellie, right?
Sophie and Ella.
Ella, sorry.
Yeah.
12 and 11? No, 13.
11 and 9, soon to be 10. So let's say 11 and 10.
Oh, okay, 11 and 10. And you're so busy in all of these different Baha'i-inspired works. What's it like being a Baha'i parent? What do you worry about? What do you struggle with in raising your daughters? What are your priorities?
Well, the priorities are, of course, making sure that our kids grow up being, Baha'is, that they will serve the world. They will live a life that will make the world a better place. And I tell them all the time that I don't want you to be average. By that, what I mean is, I don't want you to have an average impact on the world or no impact. You got to have some level of impact, a meaningful life that they got to live. So making sure that, they're familiar with Baha'i teachings, service, ultimately in this dispensation, it's about actions, not about words. So getting them involved in Baha'i-inspired service is a big part of, what my wife and I try to focus on. At the end, though, their choices will determine, what kind of life they will lead. We will, once they're 18 and a bit older, we'll provide advice and we'll pray for them, but the rest will be up to them.
Right. And I should say a little bit about another one of your many facets that's been very inspiring to me is when I first met you, you were a board member on the Mona Foundation. And
Advisory board member.
Advisory board member, and you worked with them for years, and Guya was on the board, your wife, and you helped promote education and raise money for schools all over the world through Mona, and that's great. And now you're focusing your philanthropical work on Tahrir Justice Foundation. I've already interviewed Layli Millers. What has that been like? What have you learned, and what do you get out of being a board member on Tahrir?
So I feel like my wishes are all coming true because I saw Layli give that speech at ABS, and I told Goya that I'm jealous of the role that she has, and so not only I was able to buy my company back and rebrand it under One Planet and instill some of the Baha'i principles and use this as my playground to figure out how we can do things better. But also then Layli, I got to know her more at that conference. And about a year later, she invited me to join the board at Tahrir Justice. And I love the organization for many reasons. It's an extremely well-run organization, which is one thing to be nonprofit, is another to be a nonprofit that's run better than for-profit. And when I go to the board meetings, I get exposed to level of, I think, expectation and professionality that I can learn a lot from. And I feel like it's an organization that's a great steward of the money that's contributed to it. And the impact that it's had has been amazing. 19,000 women in the last 19 years have been served by Tahrir Justice.
Well, not only that, but also the laws that have been changed and the impact in Washington, D.C.
Exactly. I mean, 19,000 women have directly been able to gain their freedom because of Tahrir Justice's effort. On top of that, the laws that they've been able to influence and get them changed have probably affected millions and millions of people. So it's really a wonderful organization and, founded in the name of course, a great heroine of the Baha'i Faith. So I feel really privileged to be part of it.
And I imagine it has a special resonance for you as an immigrant and that harrowing story that you had as an immigrant, and so many of these women seeking asylum in the United States have gone through terrible persecution in their own countries and have their own immigrant stories.
Absolutely. And also as a father of two girls, and the freedom that they have in this country and being grateful for that. It definitely has a special meaning.
So what Baha'i books are you reading right now, and how are they inspiring you?
So I see the book, The Secret of Divine Civilization, on your desk, and I just recently finished that. I love that book. That when you think about Abdul Baha wrote that book in the 1800s about Iran. But it's a book not about Iran and not about the 1800s. It's really about how world, and other countries can be better managed. So I love that book. But the book I'm reading right now is The Priceless Pearl. And I love that book because the guardian of the faith, Shoaib Effendi, and everything that he went through from the moment that he was named the guardian and just throughout his ministry, his travels, it's really inspiring. And I think that it is through these stories that we can learn a lot about how we can potentially live a more Baha'i, life. Because it's one thing to read the teachings of the faith, but it's completely another when you read about how the Guardian or Abou Baha lived their lives. And it's really helpful to see what kind of nuggets out of those I can take and apply to my own life. And in my own small little, meaningless existence, maybe I can, do a little bit better as a result of, what I've just learned from what I've read. So I really like that. It helps me put things into work every day.
That's great. The stories around Shoaib Effendi when he was first appointed guardian, and the fact that he essentially had this kind of almost nervous breakdown and went up.
So human.
It's so human.
Yes.
And he went up. Here's the center of the modern faith, a worldwide faith with, at the time, hundreds of thousands of adherents. And he has a meltdown when he's given all that authority at the tender age of 23 or however old he was, and going up to Switzerland to recover. And, of course, the greatest holy leaf, Baha'u'llah's sister, kind of becoming the center of the covenant at that time for that temporary time. But that is such a human story and so relatable. Like, we've all gone through something like that, and we can relate to what that would be like to have that enormous pressure put on your shoulders and to just be overwhelmed. We've all experienced overwhelm and collapse, whether it's in hard times in life or a divorce or just difficulties in school or work or with family. And I love the humanness of that aspect of the story. And my favorite part of it, and I tell this story to my son, Walter, about how when Shoghi Effendi came back and they said, what happened and why are you back and what's going on? And he said that great quote is, I fought with myself and I conquered myself. Am I saying it right? I think I'm saying it right. And I love that idea that his self in this case was a self of fear, of doubt. And there's ego in fear and in doubt. It's certainly not selfless service, but that was where his self was holding on. And he needed all those months up in the Alps, hiking mountains and praying and meditating and isolating. Again, a retreat to nature, just like, Baha'u'llah took and so many prophets have taken to have conquered himself. And then he came back and boy, was he ready to go.
You're absolutely right. And it also, a few years ago, I climbed Kilimanjaro. And my wife used to give me a hard time and say that there's so many mountains close by. Why do you have to go to Africa to climb a mountain? Now I can have a good excuse and say that, hey, well, look, No, but I think there's something to be said about nature and, just taking the time to be alone. But I think those are some of the things that we can frankly learn, that during our difficult times in life, looking back at some of these kinds of stories, I think we see some of the patterns of what, great people did and how they handle some of those challenges. And maybe we can learn a little bit from them and, come to terms with our own difficulties. But you're absolutely right. When you read those stories that Shoghi Effendi would get up every morning and he would go on these hikes and he wouldn't be back till late in the evening. And many days he would just have one meal. That's all he could afford. That's all he would have. I mean, those are really inspiring stories.
Yeah. And what Baha'i quote or teaching are you thinking about these days or pondering, or what issue in your faith are you most struggling with or wrestling with right now?
Good question. I cannot say that I've thought about that a whole lot, but there is a quote that I recently came across that talks about, now I don't have it here with me and I'm not gonna do a good job paraphrasing it, but Mr. Frutan has said that this was from Baha'u'llah, and I'm sure if anywhere else it's been written or not, but talks about 4 qualities that Baha'u'llah really appreciates in individuals.
It's one of my favorite quotes. I do youth classes on that.
Oh, really? So you may remember, the quote better than I do. I don't have it memorized. If you have it, bring it up. So... I know I have it too somewhere.
We'll just edit this out. Okay, here it is. This is from Haneda the Cause. Ali Akbar Furatan. The Blessed Beauty often remarked, there are 4 qualities which I love to see manifested in people. First, enthusiasm and courage. Second, a face wreathed in smiles and a radiant countenance. Third, that they see all things with their own eyes and not through the eyes of others. Fourth, the ability to carry a task, once begun, through to its end.
I love that. And that's pretty comprehensive. And so recently I had this printed for all the employees at One Planet. They should all have in their cubes, and with them. Because I think that this pretty much tells you everything that you're supposed to do in order to, have the characteristics that are going to help you be successful in any aspects of your life.
When I do exercises, I always have the youth kind of try and guess what the 4 qualities would be. And they'll be like humility or...
Pray a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But these ones, there's so much about enthusiasm and courage, a face wreathed in smiles, seeing things for yourself and follow through, carrying things through, which of course Shoghi Effendi had all of these in spades. I mean, it was ridiculous. But that last one.
Yes.
That last one. Oh, that's a tough one. To carry a task once begun through to its end. I know that when we started Soul Pancake, we wanted to pull a plug so many times. And I would think about that quote, like, no, I need to...
Keep going.
I need to keep going. I need to follow this through. I need to see where this ends. And I'm going to be dogged in my determination. Yeah.
I mean, didn't Abou Baha also say that Baha'is should be charismatic?
Did he? I don't know.
Yeah.
Was that a quote?
And I don't want to misspeak, but I'm 95% sure. I'm not going to say 99. 95% sure that he did say that. Anyhow, but I think that goes back to, having a smile and, being, what's the beginning of this quote right now? That 4 qualities. First, enthusiasm and courage. I think that also somehow relates to being charismatic. But yeah, that quote I love because I feel like, it can really be a way of life.
And what are you struggling with most these days in terms of your faith or to be a better Baha'i?
I can tell you what I worry about the most. I worry about as a parent that, with social media, I cannot say no to everything. I cannot say no to every form of social media forever. So how do I, allow my kids to have enough freedom to experiment, but at the same time, protect them enough and instill the values that are really important to me and my wife?
Yeah, those are huge issues. Yeah. I feel the same way. How much do you protect and shield your children from all of that exposure, all of that kind of mindless distraction?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't completely shield them from the outside world because they're going to have to learn how to navigate it as spiritual beings in a materialistic world.
And they spend most of the day not with my wife and I. Mm-hmm. So if I think that I'm shielding them from those things, I'm kidding myself. I think the real answer is, how do we give them the tools, the values, so they learn how to navigate these things themselves, but hopefully in a way that they understand what it is that they're doing and they're getting exposed to, and they can choose better.
Great. Well, Pam Zamani, it's been just an honor talking to you. Thanks for being on the Baha'i Blogcast. And you're writing a book.
I am writing a book, so you are an inspiration.
Well, okay, good. Following my footsteps. That's really exciting. Maybe it'll be done in another year or two?
Yeah, hopefully in the next 12 months it will be done. And it's been an interesting
What's it
experience.
About, essentially?
It's a bunch of different things. It's like everything else in my life is very chaotic. So it's about an immigrant story, the story of also a Baha'i kid growing up in Iran, and also an entrepreneur story. So put them all together, you'll get a chaotic thing out of it.
Well, see, now that I brought it up, you've got to follow this task through to its end.
Oh, I will. I will not sell any, unfortunately. But
put me down for 20 copies.
I know, exactly.
Thanks, Payam.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Baha'i Blogcast. Hope you enjoyed the episode and the conversation. Check out more fun Baha'i stuff on Baha'iBlog.net. Thank you so much, and good night.